If you're wanting to take your family to a national park and you don't know which one to choose or what would be a good fit for your family today, I'm going to share with you one of America's most diverse and breathtaking national parks. We're heading to the Pacific Northwest to discover Olympic National Park, and I can't wait to share with you my tips, tricks, blunders, highlights, and even share some itinerary options for your family. If you want to start traveling more with your family, this podcast is for you. Welcome to Wonderwise, a family travel podcast. I'm Megan Whitley Medlin, a mama of 4 with a serious case of wanderlust. Traveling with kids presents many challenges, but with the right tools in your toolbox, you can create unforgettable memories. Whether you enjoy exploring U.S. national parks or international destinations, this podcast is your ultimate resource to inspire your travels and help you craft well-thought-out itineraries for your family's next big adventure. Get ready to plan smarter and wander wisely. Your next adventure starts now. Hello, friends and wanderers. It is finally spring, and I am so excited to be getting these longer days and warmer weather, and I'm in full planning mode. Of course, I kind of live in planning mode because that's my job, but just the excitement of, spring break coming up and your main summer break with your kids at home, and maybe you have a trip on the horizon. It's just so much promise in spring, and sunshine just never hurt the mood. Such a mood booster. So I'm excited to share with you today one of my most beloved national parks, and that is Olympic National Park. It is located in the state of Washington, beautiful Washington, and I recommend this all the time to families who are outdoor lovers. They want to take their kids to be able to see a different part of the country, and there's so much to offer in this park. So let's just get right into it in what I think could be probably one of my top 5 national park recommendations for families. I mean, there's just not that many places that you can visit where you can have mountains and big mountains, snow-capped mountains, a rainforest, and then gorgeous beaches and coastlines. It's all in this national park, and there's just so much to explore. Because there are so many different areas of this park, having a plan is essential, because unlike some other national parks where you can go and drive a scenic highway and kind of get your sea legs there as you're the first day you arrive, and you're like, okay, well, we'll take this day to kind of drive through the scenic road, and then we'll maybe make notes of what we want to do the rest of our time here. Olympic National Park is essentially a very large loop, and if you're not aware of the drive times between each places, you're going to be really, really screwed. Let's just face it, because you're going to have a ton of time in the car. So planning to stay in one area and see and do Olympic National Park, it's just not going to work. You've got to break it up into different segments if you have the time to do so. If you only have a long weekend, or if you're in Washington State and you have a day or two, we can talk about options and ways to get to see some of the park. But if you want to fully experience all the beauty and splendor of Olympic, I'm going to recommend 4 to 7 days for being able to stay in a couple different areas and get to really dive into all that the park has to offer. You may or may not be familiar with Washington State, but there are 3 national parks within the state. So when my family visited on a 10-day trip in August of 2022, we actually visited, we started up in North Cascades and then came down and worked our way around Olympic National Park. And then from there, we went to Mount St. Helens. We went to Mount Rainier, which is another national park, and then finished out our time in Seattle. There is so much to do in Washington State, and it just blew me away with the diversity. And I'm so glad that we got to see some of those places. We were coming down after a couple of days staying in North Cascades, which is an incredibly beautiful park, and I think one that really flies under the radar. I may have to do another episode on that one, but I wanted to make sure that we could hit that park while we were in the state. And so as we were coming in, traveling from that northern area down to where Olympic National Park is, we stopped and we did a whale tour where we went out on the water and got to see some humpback whales. And honestly, I thought this is, no big deal. We'll just take a ferry from what was the name of that? Anna Cortez. We're just going to take a ferry out of that area and go to Port Townsend and kind of, skid across the water and then make our way to our Airbnb that we were staying at in Port Angeles. What I did not plan for was you have to reserve these ferries well in advance. You can't just show up and hop on the next ferry because your whole car is going over. And, being from the South, this is just something that I'm not used to. We don't have ferries. The only time I've taken a ferry with a car was on our coastline, and that's just very rare. I think we've done it maybe twice. So this was a new experience for us, and we did not get our ferry reserved in time. And they said you can come into the standby line, and maybe you can get on the very last one for the evening. And in a panic, we got there so early to get in the standby line to make it across. Had we not made it, we would have had to driven almost 5 hours around the water to get to Port Angeles. And after that long day of driving already, I could not imagine how that was going to work in the car. So tip, plan your ferry in advance. I remember getting on the ferry and just cheering that we had made it. I was so worried. The kids had no idea. They were completely oblivious, but I was stoked. How do you get to Olympic National Park? Unless you're, in driving distance, which we were not. This would be a very long drive for us East Coasters. You're going to want to fly into Seattle, and you could take the ferry to Bainbridge Island or Edmonds Kingston. You could drive to Port Angeles from there. And then from the south, you could take I-5 to Olympia, Washington, and then US 101 up the coast. So there's a couple different ways to get there, just depending on where you're coming from. Again, I've said it before, but Olympic National Park is massive. There's no one single entrance or exit. It's just shaped like a giant loop with different sections spread really far apart from one another. And I'm going to share with you how I structured our family's visit that maximized our fun level and reduced the meltdowns that come with really long drive times. And that is staying in different areas of the park. Just for example, Port Angeles to the Hoh Rainforest is about a 2-hour drive. And, that's just not something you're going to really want to do in one day if you're choosing to stay in one of those locations versus spending some time or moving around in the national park. All right, so the first section out of 3 is Hurricane Ridge, and this is the part of the park that is full of long-range mountain views. It is like a ridge line of mountains, and that is about a 30 to 40-minute drive from Port Angeles. I really like this section of the park because I love mountains, obviously, but it's great and easy to reach for those really spectacular views. Once you make that windy drive up the mountain road, you're going to be met with these stunning mountain views at the summit there. Hurricane Ridge is one of the more popular destinations within the national park, and because of its convenient location, it's not that far from, the main town of Port Angeles. It's at an elevation of just over 5,000 feet, so even in the summer with the winds blowing, you'll want to have, some layers, a jacket, especially for the kids if they're prone to getting a little chilly with that elevation. But in the summertime, which I would recommend visiting in the summer, you can enjoy hiking trails, wildflower meadows, and beautiful panoramic views. There's also an excellent visitor center and a great little picnic area. I believe the visitor center had like little sandwiches and things. We had packed a lunch, so we ate at the picnic tables and just sat outside and looked at the view. And sometimes you can spot deer and other little critters roaming around. So that was, that's really exciting for the kids to see some wildlife there too. The visitor center has educational exhibits and interactive displays about the park's unique ecosystems and is a really good spot to take in that just gorgeous scenery without too much of an effort. Definitely make your way there first thing in the morning, especially in the summer. Things can get really busy. There is quite a bit of parking here, but as the day goes on, mid-morning to mid-afternoon, it will be quite busier in the visitor center and the surrounding areas. Be sure and check out if there will be any ranger talks or interactive programs that the kids might enjoy. You can register for those ahead of time and spend some time going around the visitor center exhibits. I know that can be a little bit harder with kids in tow. Sometimes mom and dad want to stop and read, and the kids would rather, go outside and run around. So maybe you can take turns. You can hike Hurricane Hill Trail. It's about a 3-mile round trip. It's a moderate hike with really pretty views and a possibility of spotting some unique wildlife like the deer. Whether you have a day to spend in this area or if you're kind of just passing through, definitely take advantage of those beautiful long mountain ranges by asking someone to take a family photo with that in the background. It would be a great Christmas card and just a really nice spot to have that permanent memory of your time in Olympic National Park. After you have had your lunch, maybe taken in a trail, you're going to head to Lake Crescent. The area of Olympic National Park is about a 45-minute drive from Hurricane Ridge. You can explore the historic Crescent Lake Lodge, or Lake Crescent Lodge. There's a large stone fireplace, some rocking chairs. They've got ice cream at the lodge store. But most people are coming to Lake Crescent for Mary Mere Falls. This is a really lovely hike. It's great for kids. It's on the shorter end, just under 2 miles of a round trip. It's pretty flat through an old growth forest, and you get to go across this really unique log bridge, which the kids will love, and keep an eye out for those famous banana slugs. We saw banana slugs on logs on this trail. They're these maybe like 6 to 8 inch long yellow snails. This is so unique and something that Olympic National Park is known for. The Merrimack Falls is a round trip hike, so you're making your way to the gorgeous 90-foot waterfall there at the end, and it's so pretty. You may have to wait your turn to take a picture without anybody in it, as it is one of the more popular areas, but definitely a not to miss activity inside the park. And from there, you can make your way to the lake itself. You can rent a kayak or a paddleboard, skip stones. Kids just like to throw rocks in the water. It's just kind of a fun thing to do. Or you can choose to swim in the water in the summer. Even in the summer, it's so cold. But my kids loved it. They had a great time. So pack a towel and a swimsuit and a change of clothes and jump right in. Just a mom tip here, Lake Crescent Lodge has really clean, accessible restrooms in this area, And if you have forgotten something that you need, like bug spray or sunscreen, the gift shop has those essentials available. You could modify this to spend a whole day at Lake Crescent if you wanted to split up that time, but it does pair really well if you wanted to split the day with Hurricane Ridge before heading back to Port Angeles for your overnight stay. In Port Angeles, you could visit the city pier and look for seals and sea lions in the harbor if you had some time after dinner in Port Angeles. If you only had one day for Olympic National Park, that itinerary that I just went over would be my pick, that you could get to see some of what Olympic offers. You are missing out on the rainforest and the coastline, but if you only have a day, that would be where it would be easiest, I think, to concentrate your time. If you've got more time, I do suggest that you leave from the Hurricane Ridge area and go up to the most northwestern point of the contiguous U.S., and that is going to Cape Flattery. It's quite a bit of drive from Port Angeles. It's about a 2-hour drive, and you'll need to pick up a permit because you are on the reservation there. But you can take a short trail out to the most northwestern tip of the U.S. It's incredible views. You've got these kind of jaggedy coastline. The water's this really pretty green color, and you've got that famous like northwestern fog that just made everything so moody. You could hear the sea lions barking. It was worth the drive out for sure if you have the time. From there, you could go to Forks and set up for your home base in Forks, Washington. So whether or not you're making that trudge out to Cape Flattery, I would suggest this second segment that you spend home base in Forks. This was really important to me because I'm a huge Twilight fan, so there's all kinds of Twilight memorabilia from the movies. There's even a museum that you can go into and see some of the costumes and some of the paraphernalia that was used in the series. So that was really exciting. My kids, we had started showing some of the older kids the movies and before we took the trip, and they weren't quite as into it as I was, but after reading the books and watching the movies, it was a must stop. And then through the town of Forks, there are little like some of the homes and then Bella's truck you can go and see. So cool. It's a really small town though, so I think there are a couple of hotels, but you'll probably be staying in some sort of Airbnb or short-term rental. In this section of the park, there are several beaches that you may be interested in visiting. Rialto Beach has just massive piles of driftwood, and it's scattered all up and down the coast. And a lot of people go here for sunset because it's just such a lovely view. So we actually spent some time there in the evening. The kids had so much fun climbing around the driftwood and on the piles of logs and things. So that was a really fun place to, take a camp chair or a blanket and just park for a couple hours watching the sun go down. The water is super duper cold. It doesn't ever seem to stop my kids from getting in, but just be forewarned, it's not warm. Something that was so important to me is that we would be able to visit one of the beaches at low tide or negative tide. I was not familiar with that term before planning this trip, but a negative tide is when the water is, below where it normally would be. So you're getting exposed to all the little sea creatures like starfish and anemones that would be under the water the majority of the day. Not every day has a negative tide at a convenient time. So this was really tricky, and you just kind of have to go be flexible with what, your day is going to look like. For us, the negative tide for Second Beach was going to line up pretty well for us to get up and out fairly early, not too early, so that we could park and take the short-ish, I think it was about a mile hike to Second Beach and get to see some of these incredible sea creatures. A few apps that I used for tide charts, Tide Alert, Tides Near Me, Tide Charts. And then I think there's even a website that shows tide tracking so that you can kind of plan your day. We spent quite a bit of time at Second Beach. So as you're planning, you want to kind of allow enough time for you to, first of all, drive from where you're staying to the parking area, and then also the walk it takes from the car to the beach to plan for that negative tide. So the tide's constantly moving, but we were able to have a couple hours of excellent viewing where we got to walk on this long expanse of beach. There's huge haystacks out in the water, and the tide is way, way out. So along a lot of these rocks are purple, orange starfish. They're huge starfish, just, like bigger than the size of your hand. And they're stuck to these rocks, all kind of mollusks and goosenecks and anemones, just such vibrant colors that to me was the most amazing part of this entire park trip, was being able to see the sea life there. Of course, not touching any of that, but being able to walk around and climb on some of the rocks and explore those tide pools was so amazing. We came across a washed up octopus, which was really interesting for the kids. It was dead. I think it was missing several tentacles. I think it had probably had an encounter with something, but to see that was really unique. There's some driftwood there. I think people camp out there as well, so that in the night, that is one of the spots for the bioluminescence, where you have it's like a bacteria. I'm probably not explaining this correctly, but there's like a bacteria or some sort of phenomena where at night those are illuminated and you can see like all these amazing colors in the night in the water. So something really special if you're interested in camping or, staying late into the night to experience that. We met some people who had camped that night and they said it was incredible to see. Had we had younger or older kids, maybe, I don't know, we just did not have the appropriate gear for staying that long into the night, but it would have been awesome. So if you're a camper, check out some of the resources on that to experience that bioluminescence. Another beach you may be interested in for tide pooling is Ruby Beach. And there are all kinds of beaches up and down the coast of Washington, but Ruby and Second Beach are pretty well known for their tide pooling. So just check those tide charts and plan accordingly for your day of the visit that you'll be able to be there. Kalilak Beach is another famous beach, and what makes that beach so famous is the Tree of Life. I'm not sure if you have seen that tree before, but there's basically two eroded dunes, and in between those eroded areas is a tree, and all of its roots are exposed, and it just continues to grow with, it's like you're looking at what would be underneath ground, but those eroded areas have slipped away over time, and so all of the roots are exposed, and it's called the Tree of Life. Really unique to see. It was very important to me that I see that before it falls, and I read an article a couple months ago that after some of the winter storms, it has, of course, just continued to erode more. And so, the big question is when will this tree eventually collapse? When will it be no more? And that will be a very sad day. So it was important to me, and another reason why I chose to visit Olympic over another park, just because, you don't know when these things are going to go away. And it was important to me to see that. So we did make time, about an hour, to go to Kalilock and walk down to the Tree of Life. And the third segment of this large national park road trip will be the Hoh Rainforest. And this part of the park can be explored any time of the year. I would say late in the summer, it's actually going to be the least amount green because, it's not the most rainiest time of the year. So if you want to see it in that lush, most green, you would want to visit sometime other than summer. But it was still, in my opinion, green, yellow, still magical. This part of the park, you're going to experience more wait times as far as entry into the park. So getting there earlier or late in the day will be most beneficial, but expect to spend some time waiting in line in the car to be admitted into the park. They want to keep the crowd levels down, so it's pretty much a one out, one in situation as far as allowing cars to come into the park. There are lots of different hiking trails, and I use All Trails for my hiking planning. It's a great app. The paid version, I think, is like $60 or $80 a year, but it's well worth that if you're a hiker. We did the Hall of Mosses, which was a pretty, flat trail, and you're going through and seeing lots of tall trees that are logs that are turned over, and it's just green. Everywhere you go, it's just green and kind of ethereal. I would think this would be more mystical if you were going, first thing in the morning, if it's kind of foggy. But we were there midday probably. So this was pretty. I would say it was not my family's most favorite part. I think the trails were just really crowded, and it wasn't as challenging, which typically for my family, if the more challenging the trail, the better the behavior. Go figure that. Anything that's easy, I know we just had to keep staying on the kids that day. For some reason, they were just nitpicking, and it could have been that we just spend a lot of together time and they were over it. But really beautiful part of the park. Definitely worth your time to visit if you have an extended trip. I would probably rank the beaches as the most spectacular part of the park, and then Hurricane Ridge, and then the rainforest. As far as where you should stay for these three sections, Port Angeles is going to be a great base for Hurricane Ridge part of the park. There's, hotel options, camping options, Airbnb, Vrbo type options. Forks is going to be a great base for your beaches and the rainforest. You've got lots of camping at Kaliak Campground, Hoh Campground. Heart of the Hills Campground is actually near Hurricane Ridge. So there are some budget-friendly options as well as, nicer stays. Lake Crescent Lodge is great to stay for the lake views. It's very family-friendly. But, some of these places, it's just a little bit easier to stay in a house like an Airbnb if that's more of your family's travel style. Some packing tips for Olympic National Park. You definitely want to have all the layers: rain jackets, long sleeves, warmer clothes. Even in the summertime, it's about 15 degrees cooler than on Hurricane Ridge than it is from Port Angeles. So, having all the layers is going to be super duper important. And then, of course, you're in the Pacific Northwest, so a rain jacket is essential. You'll want to have bug spray and sunscreen, water shoes for the tide pools. If you're going to be exploring around, the rocks can be kind of jaggedy in some places. So just be really aware of, not to interfere with the wildlife, but having the water shoes and exploring around would be very helpful. And then, of course, lots and lots of snacks, because you're going to be in the car so many hours with this trip. Cell service can be pretty spotty in a lot of these areas, so make sure you have offline maps available. Download your trail maps, and bring activities for those drives, coloring books, travel games. We try to eliminate some of the screen time in the car. It's inevitable whenever you have these long trips, but some of these activities can at least break up the time. And then, of course, you want to do the junior ranger activities in the books that you can pick up at each visitor center. Washington State and Olympic National Park in itself is a bucket list destination for families because of the tremendous amount of nature things to do. The scenery is incredible. It is a beast of a trip to plan. You're going to want to have all of this laid out very well in advance. And of course, book your ferry tickets in advance so that you're not ending up like I was, in a panic waiting for the ferry, if that is even part of your itinerary. And if Olympic National Park feels too overwhelming to plan on your own, this is where my expertise really shines. Schedule a travel consultation with me, and we'll chit-chat about your plans, and I would be more than happy to assist in booking some of these accommodations for you and helping you with an overall itinerary if you are feeling stressed out by the planning of this park. A lot of families come to me because they're so overwhelmed with the planning and they do not have the time to, work on an itinerary of this nature. So if you are in that situation and you're wanting to go, let me help you, and let's get this trip scheduled and work together to get a perfect itinerary that's suited for your family. Remember that the best family memories often come from the unplanned moments between destinations. So don't stress out too much. Go and enjoy this beautiful park and make those incredible family memories. If you found this podcast helpful, I would love a review. Share it with a travel-loving friend, and be sure to join me in my free Facebook community. I will link that group in the comments, but I always share destination insights, travel tips. I'm focused on families. I want to get you guys out and exploring this incredible world. Thanks for being here. Until next time, wander wisely. Thanks for joining another episode of WonderWise. I hope you're feeling inspired to plan your family's next unforgettable adventure. Join the community in my private travel Facebook group, linked in the show notes, for more travel tips and ideas. If you'd like a customized plan for your next vacation, fill out the form in the show notes to get started. Until next time, wander wisely.